is from my Motherlode series, and it's the first time I have combined my needlepoint with a painting. Before they were two separate entities, and I decided to merge them. So hence the Motherlode series, everything coming together. A lot of the needlepoints were done in Italy when I was on a residency. All of these paintings have an Italian title, which is part of my heritage also. The pigments in this whole body of work are dried clay pigments that I got in Santa Fe. So I like to use a lot of my Treble materials and put them into my paintings. This painting is from my Posse series, and I have 3 women that I work with, and we exchange ideas and we critique each other. And it was my idea for each one of us to take an element from another person's painting and incorporate it into your own painting. So this one is after Shula, because I got these sort of circular images from Shula, and then I elaborated and did my own thing with it. It's paper, paint, and thread on canvas. The meandering of the shapes interests me. The way they just, as I stitched, I went along there. I don't plan my paintings. I just sort of jump into them. That's how this one came about. This is called Now What? And it's 15 drawings that I did because of the coronavirus. I had, materials at home. But anyway, this body of work inspired me to do a series of black and white paintings that are growing from this. So the rigid or rectilinear lines are going to be armature, and I'm going to build forward like I did here with all the shapes. So this will be white on black, and then there'll be black on white, so it'll be another, that yin yang thing I like to do. Kind of like this and that. So I'm kind of on This is called coup de rat. And I'm going to use it as a circle. Oops. Improv. I don't usually work with a theme before I start, but these 2 paintings, which are not part of a series, were done with a show in mind that Peter Frank, the curator, was curating, and I do like him and his eye, so I wanted to get in that show. Anyway, this is bass and treble, because the theme of the show was music. And they're actually done in oil paint, not my usual acrylic. The background has a lot of textural elements because I am a lot about texture. But the foreground, I call these, obviously, these little notes, the foreground, and they are very visceral, very tangible. You can almost pluck them off the painting. To me, there's a sensuality to these shapes that don't occur in the background. They're almost like living creatures in a sense. Which to me, music is like, a lot of times, it's so abstract, yet it's so alive that this sort of made me think of that when I was making the painting. My Menorca series. I visited the smaller island, not Mallorca, but Menorca in Spain a few years ago, And what intrigued me more than anything were the walls that were done from the quarries and the fences, and there's no mortar, there's nothing to hold it together, so it's an art form. After I came back, I decided to do a series of paintings, not knowing where they were gonna go. I may have done this needlepoint there. So they evolved into primarily a black and white series, with the color being less dominant, although color still wants to pop out. So it's collage elements, it's needlepoint, it's thread. The whole series is done as a body of work. Some of the places are screened so you can actually see through the wall. And I think there are 8 of these. The white refers to the white walls in many of the small towns that were just almost, you think you were in Greece, but you were in Spain. So they had that beautiful whiteness to them. These boxes are called spy cakes, and they are various media. I'll turn them if you would like, and each side is different. And there are some Russian words in it, there's some Jewish words in them. I attached some of my needlepoint. They're basically like my paintings in 4 or 5 sides, and also some lettering that I like to attach. Lots of collage elements. The reason they're called spy cakes is because it was kind of around when some kind of Russian spying was going on, and I thought that would be funny. And they called cakes, obviously, because it looks like you could take a bite out of them. They're very delicious in a way. This piece and that piece are brother and sister, and the rolled up canvases I did on my residency in Wyoming, and they were sort of inspired by all the hay stacks that are in the fields there, in the rural area, in the ranch and the farms, and then they became bandage-like to me, because I'm always thinking about, I guess, repair. And I left them white for a long time. And then what happened is I used this grid fabric on this one. I put it on a piece of paper on the wall. So this is the residue of that grid. And that's how this pair came about. And then these had to become black. I decided that the white wouldn't work for these. So again, they become the complements, the opposites. And people have made comments on these. They feel like they look like leftovers or destruction or cityscape after it's been damaged. It also reminds me of like oil spills and stuff. Things come to me after the fact. I know that many artists are like that, especially non-objective artists. This is another one of my spy cake series. I did 8x8s and 10x10 sizes. And each side is different. I actually entered these in a show called The Art of the Square, and the person who juried the show said she was going to give me an award, but she couldn't because it was not a painting. It was a 3-dimensional piece, so that's that. There's string, there's chain, of course my needlepoint, those beads I just talked about a little while ago, and I just like to throw a bunch of different elements together and sort of force them to work in unity. So the beading and the needlepoint, and then the chain, and then the thread, they're all sort of silly things I like to throw together and see if they can marry each other. And then this is paper, and then these I actually rolled up pieces of paper and stuck them in. And then there's a couple of sides that are 2-dimensional, not with relief. But to me, each side could be a painting, if I wanted them to be. This is also from my Menorca series, and I chose to do the series in black and white as the dominant color. And the difference between this one a little bit is, instead of cutting a hole in the canvas, I stitched this one on top, and so it's almost like it's being tied and bound to the canvas. It's not incorporated into it, and I just felt like something told me that this one had to stay on the top, and that's what happened. There's a lot of control and a lot of chaos, and then formality comes in later. I don't really like to know where I'm going. I like the journey. These pieces are the rest of that piece, and they will be mounted on Japanese paper, which I have over there in the corner. But this is another piece that grew out of my residency, or actually happened during my residency. Artist residencies are the greatest thing that could happen to us, because you're among your element and nobody's judging you, and you can just let yourself go. So I put a big piece of paper up on the wall in my studio in Wyoming, and I let other artists come in and draw on it, whatever they wanted to. And then I cut it up before I left, just so I would pack it, and also to make the pieces more random. And when I came back, I just drew on top of some things. And each piece is numbered. I like to use numbers a lot. We all are identified by our numbers. But the numbering, the piece won't be hung chronologically. The numbers will be random. And this also will be dipped in this sort of waxy medium I'm going to use when I attach them to the paper. I painted the back of them this beautiful ultramarine blue, or YKB, Eve Klein blue. So when a light shines on them and they're sort of looking like sconces on a wall, the blue will reflect on the paper and the background, which will give it another dimension, but an ethereal dimension. This painting is the impetus for this body of work, the dresses. I did a series of paintings on a road trip in France, from Avignon to Paris. My son was driving, and I could get stoned and draw, and I drew. These all came from the transformer towers that you see along the side of the road. The French don't goop up their highways with, a lot of advertising. So they just sort of stood out. And then for some reason they turned into these little kimonos or dresses or coverings. And when I was in the residency again, I brought all this fabric with me because I didn't want to bring paint. My concept was to change the hierarchy of my work from paint to textiles. And I started cutting these out, and I have many, many more to cut. And eventually, many of them will look like this. They'll have this sort of weathered patina on them. And these little doilies are strange to put with this tacky fabric, but there's something about the two that made sense to me. And many of these doilies were given to me by a very good friend of mine whose mother just recently died, but she was a Holocaust survivor. And I'm just so happy to have her doilies in my work. And I'm not Jewish, but the Italians and the French also did a lot of hand-done things. It was very much a woman's job. So it kind of references that to the idea of the beauty and the fragility of it with this utterly tacky fabric. So they're growing. They keep growing and growing and growing. See how the little towers are in there, and then these turned out looking like little mitts for the oven. It's kind of weird, but that's okay, And here's another tower. So they became a little series, Avignon to Paris. I was 70 for that trip, so it was very meaningful excursion for me.